Hi there and welcome back to a brand new day in the studio. In today's video we're going to develop the forms of the face, very similar to how we did in the portrait study. It's just that this time it's going to be on a much larger and more elaborate scale. And on the palette here we have titanium white and raw umber. Both are from Winsor and Newton brand. And we have a Liquin original as our medium, just like we had yesterday. So I'm going to use a size 6 flat bristle brush, and I'm going to mix up a little value scale on the palette. So starting off here with the darkest dark. This is going to be, again, very similar to the portrait study that we did a couple days ago. The only difference is it's going to be on a much larger scale, and we're just going to try to make it better. How about that? So a little more titanium white, and that quickly we're going to have our little value scale. And we're going to use a smaller brush just to get started. So a little bit of Liquin onto this brush, and let's say around this area. And I think this is about good. So I'm going to start off, but before we start, here's an image of our model Steve. And I'm going to keep a picture of him to the top left corner of your screen so you can refer to it as the painting develops. Just like I said yesterday, this is a larger painting, however, so I'm going to have the camera at an angle just so that I don't block the footage. So just keep in mind that the canvas is going to be at a slight angle. Alright, so now let's go ahead and put in a little bit of light here for the forehead. And how about we develop the forms for the forehead first? So we're going to start off with kind of like a little middle value. Still lighter, however. So I'm going to be taking right from that value scale that you saw me mix up in the beginning. So I'm just going to be just looking at these lighter shapes. So right here, sorry, can't speak again today. So right here we have the side plane of the forehead. So here we have more of the frontal region, but it looks like the light is hitting this area a little bit more. And in the portrait study, we started off with the eye, but I think this time we're going to start off with the forehead. The forehead is, I would recommend usually starting off with the forehead. And we're not going to spend forever on each individual shape. Like I said, I'm going to try to work a little bit faster with this painting than we did with the last one. And again, that's just because this is a much larger painting and we gotta cover quickly. So this is the superciliary arch right over here. This little shape right here, also kind of sometimes referred to, I think I've referred to it also as the frontal ridge of the skull. But I think superciliary arch sounds a little better, so we'll call it that. And so we're going to think conceptually now about the form. So it's going to be fairly light over here. Now let's go ahead and push it a little bit lighter, perhaps, than we see it. And it's okay if we push the values lighter in the underpainting. I think it's actually a little bit better to push the light. And so now we're going to observe this whole little region here as one solid plane. So this is the side of the forehead, and this is a very kind of a slow curve. Remember, a slow curve is closer to being a plane. It's closer to being flat. A faster curve, such as say an area around the nose, it's going to have a much faster gradation of value. So for instance, we're going to approach a faster curve as we approach the side of the forehead, as we approach this area of the skull. It's turning away from the light much faster, but as we noted in the in the portrait study, this is also a little bit of a local value change. So it is on its own going to be a little bit darker over there. So we're just going to take that information into account. And already you're starting to see that this is starting to look like something that is existing in three-dimensional space. And that's just with a few simple values. Few simple values that we're adding on to the light and dark shapes that we established yesterday. And we're just cruising along the forms here. So it's a little bit lighter over here as this area is facing the light a little more, and a little darker as we approach the side of the head. Now, this isn't really as obvious in the photo reference, but we're just conceptualizing the form here. So as we turn away from the light right around here where I'm painting now, it's going to get a little bit darker, but almost imperceptibly darker, however, so keeping that in mind. So now we're going to go ahead and put in a little more of a drastic plane change right over here. So there's the side plane of the forehead. And just like we did with the portrait study, we're going to look for this little frontal swoop. So the frontal swoop that I'm talking about is this little plane right here. If you imagine a little arc going around across his eyes, his tear ducts towards the forehead, this is the frontal swoop. This is also the temporal region of the skull on the side. So we're throwing a little bit of anatomical stuff into the mix. Not terribly complicated. Now we're working our way down. And now it's definitely going to get a little bit darker over here. And then it's going to get a little lighter. Not that much, however. And again, I'm just taking right from the value scale that we mixed up on the palette. Having that value scale on the palette really does make things go a lot faster. And we're really trying to cover quickly. So a little bit lighter over here. So as it stands, I think the forehead's a little bit too, almost too simple. So I'm going to add a few little fluctuations of value, some little form overlaps around here. A little bit of a plane over here. And now we're going to move towards the glabella. So the glabella is just a little form right over here, right in between the two eye sockets. Going to switch to a darker brush. And we're going to start to paint in the concavity of the eye socket. So now I'm going to be keeping a light brush and a dark brush. Might throw in a halftone brush later, but I'm going to just be working with these two brushes for now. So now we're venturing off into the concavity of the eye socket. And again, I'm not really going to spend that much time on each individual shape. I think today I'll be able to move much faster just because we already have the experience from creating that portrait study from before. So now with the darker brush, I'm going to take a look at this shape for the concavity of the eye socket. Goes down a little bit more like that. And now we're going to start to have some little darker shapes around here. Still trying to keep the shapes simple and easy. even when we subdivide into smaller shapes. Simple and easy. Just because we're making a realistic painting or a painting that is reminiscent of nature doesn't mean that it has to be complicated. So again, this is getting darker because these planes are turning away from the light. And how about I think we'll introduce a little halftone brush. Let's move along quickly. So that's going to be our little halftone brush. Let's go ahead and put that tone right there. Moving fairly quickly. A little dark shape here. And up here. It's going to get a little bit lighter right here near the top side of the eye socket. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back into the darker tone right around here. It's an area of the eye socket that's kind of sneaking away from the light. Let's go ahead and add some more information here for the eyebrows. Very simple there. So with the light brush, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this edge a little bit. And at the same time, let's go ahead and put in this light shape. Very simple. It's only going to take a few values per form to get the form to read. All right, now back to the halftone brush. It's going to get a little darker, but not that much darker down there. And then it's going to get lighter right around here. Really, at this point, it's starting to feel like a sculpture. We're treating this like a sculpture. Each individual plane is representing, or each individual value is representing a plane. Remember, a plane, those of you that have been watching these videos for a while, you already know what a plane is. Remember, a plane is just a three-dimensional construct, a concept of a flat sheet in three-dimensional space. Each little area here is going to have a value that corresponds to a particular angle that the light makes with respect, or sorry, that the plane makes with respect to the light. So basically, things that are lighter because they're facing the light more than things that are darker, and that's all. And at this point, I'm not even mixing. I'm just switching back and forth between the light and the dark brushes. So remember, I have 3 brushes. Dark, middle, light. Just kind of going back and forth between them to help me sculpt these forms. A little more of a shape here for the eyebrow. going to be a little bit lighter right over here, the top plane of the nasal bone. A little bit less bright as we approach the glabella. And now we're just going to be moving along, so let's get a little bit of a halftone here. I know I'm using the light brush for that, but I think I like the way this brush feels a little better than my designated halftone brush. Just go with what feels right. So that is the side of the zygomatic bone, goes all the way up here. Zygomatic bone, again, is just a fancy way of saying the cheekbone. And as we sneak up the light, it's going to get a little bit brighter as we're sneaking up the top plane of the zygomatic region. And again, just taking right from the palette. No need to complicate things. So it's going to be a little lighter over here. Just throw in some little form overlaps. Overlapping a form right there. No details, just structure. Just the word detail alone kind of makes me cringe. Detail kind of conveys the sense of something that's just, I don't know, something that's kind of like has too much frosting. So instead, we're considering all of these smaller shapes as forms. Smaller forms resting on top of larger forms. A little bit lighter over here. So we're going to relate each individual shape a value to one another. So I think that just like we discovered in the portrait study, the smaller one, it's going to be a little form overlap right here. Tiny, tiny. Then it's going to get a little bit lighter as we approach the tear duct. Right about there. Pushing the light. We're going to push that light a little more. There we go. Lighter over here. Now switching to the dark brush, we're seeing just a little bit of a little more of a shape down here. I don't want to describe too much for that. It's going to be a little tiny shape over there. Don't want to do too much for that. I'm going to put in a little halftone there. And I think that this got a little too dark. After standing back a little bit, I noticed that that was just getting too dark. I'm going to put in this light shape. Very simple there. I'm going to sharpen this edge right along the top of the upper eyelid. Now we're moving on down. It's going to get a little brighter right here. This is almost like a little light pocket. So this is a little shape here that's kind of angled, kind of like a valley. Like these are hills and valleys, and that's kind of, I don't know, you can think of that as like a little lake that's just catching the light. And then as we move along the side of the little lake, it's going to get less bright. Because, well, you know why it's getting less bright now. It's facing away from the light. And remember that the areas that are perpendicular to the light source are going to be in full light. The areas that are parallel to the light source are going to be in shadow. And all of the stuff that goes on in between are the halftones. And that is what we're putting in here. And that is what's going to create the illusion of form. And we're creating the illusion of form using monochrome. So that when this dries, we're going to have much more of an advantage when we get into color. Remember, each stage of the process is building up to the next. The process doesn't always have to be the same. We're working a little bit different with this painting than we did with the last one. And the only difference being is that we're just moving a lot faster. And the other difference is that yesterday we pretty much covered all of the dark shapes on the canvas, whereas last time we kind of built up to that. So the process doesn't always have to be the same each time. You gotta leave room for exploration. I'm gonna soften that little line there. A little more light catching right over here. Just gonna soften that little edge. Darker over here. And a little bit darker here, but not quite as dark as that area. As we're sneaking on down the zygomatic region, I'm going to push the light there a little more. Here's this little light pocket. We're going to add just a little more light over here. So we're going to raise up that form a little bit. So that's like literally pulling the form out a little further so that it faces the light a little bit more. I'm thinking about the angle that this plane is making with respect to the light, and I think that this angle actually needs to turn a little more than I had before. Yeah, just about there. Halftone brush. Let's get it a little darker. And just about that will do. And like I said yesterday, I really am enjoying this different color that I'm using for underpainting. Well, I guess it's the same one I used last time. So again, this is Winsor Newton Raw Umber. And of course, if you're new to this channel, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below if you're curious as to what materials I'm using exactly. A little bit of a side plane down there. And then it's going to get a little bit darker. I'm sorry the canvas keeps bouncing. This is a larger canvas. Darker down there. And we're going to sneak up to the light. Very soft edge here. I sneak up to the light there. Whoops. Too bright. This is more of a plane, like a flat plane right there. Switching to the light brush, we're going to pull out this plane. Maybe that's too bright. Maybe it's not. We'll see. I'm also kind of sharpening that edge there at the same time. Alright, so now let's carry on that kind of thinking on the other side. Very simple. Just kind of sculpting away. So in the portrait study, the one we did before this, his head was actually kind of in a slightly different position. So his nose is, in this one, his nose is kind of, let's see if I can point it out. His nose is actually passing beyond the side of the contour of his face. So right here. Let's just emphasize that little contour a little better. So that's a little different than the view we had in the portrait study. And honestly, I like it a little bit better because in the portrait study, I was confused as to whether his nose was passing the boundary of the contour of the face or if it was contained within the boundary. And so here, it's clearly passing the boundary of the side of the face, which I think is just better. I don't like when things just meet perfectly. Just compositionally, it just kind of disturbs me. So this nose going over the side of that contour, to me, is just a little more aesthetically appealing. So the side of his nose is a little more structure going out like this. We'll go ahead and throw in a little bit of a highlight. Now my tendency with my underpaintings is to go a little too dark, so I'm going to try and push the light. But if I go too dark, it's alright. The nice thing about the underpainting and creating a monochromatic underpainting is that you're really giving yourself a chance to explore the value range. Whereas if I were to just jump in with color, it'd be a little bit more of a task. Imagine having to think about what color to mix for that alongside of the having to think about what angle the plane is making with relation to the light. I don't know, who knows? Maybe in the future we'll just jump in with color. Gotta leave room for exploration. A little bit more light there. Alright, so as we venture down the side of the zygomatic bone, so right around down here, the zygomatic area, it's going to taper away from the light, but there's also going to be some form overlapping, and I'll explain what I mean in just a second. So it's getting a little bit lighter now over here, darker over here. There's going to be a slight form overlap, and let's go ahead and use the halftone brush to put that in. So here's one overlapping of form. So one little plane here, and directly next to it, right around here, it's going to be lighter. So right over here, going to be a little bit lighter, but it still needs to stay in this relative value family. And then since it's lighter there's going to be another overlap of form right around here, and it's going to get darker, but not quite as dark as this plane here, because this plane is just angled away from the light much more. So we're just cruising along these forms. Very simple. And then it's going to get lighter around here, but that's pretty much going to be lighter just because the beard, the values for the beard are going to influence that. And so now that we have all of the information that we need for the face to look at least a little bit convincing in three-dimensional space, now we're just going to fine-tune all of these shapes. So that is, let's go ahead and revisit this plane. See how much lighter we can go. So let's just go ahead and start to key some of these lights off of this value. Keying the light means I'm going to evaluate the lighter shapes, say this one, this one, this one, based off of this light. So this light here is going to be fairly bright. It's going to be my lightest light, I think, at least for the flesh tones. But now it's just way too bright in comparison to all of these. Maybe this one is actually getting there, but I'm just going to go ahead and just lightly spread the paint into these shapes here. And then at the same time push this one. And now at this stage it's going to be very back and forth-ish. So just going to be moving back and forth between all of these light shapes until they work. See, that was too light. Now that we have the face underpainted, let's go ahead and go back to that brush that we used in the beginning to mix up the value scale. We're going to get a little halftone somewhere right in the middle of the value scale. Let's see, maybe a little bit darker. So let's just go one step darker. And I think right about there. So I want a halftone, and I'm going to use this halftone to fill all of this stuff, or this whole shape around the hair. And then this is going to be kind of alla prima style. Then after that we're going to paint wet on wet and develop the forms for the ear and for the beard. But we're going to do that much faster. And it's alright if we can still see these lines for the original drawing. I actually don't want them to go away. And we're going to layer this. This painting is going to have quite a number of layers, so no worries there. So very simply just covering all of this with this value. And the ear is going to have a little bit of a darker halftone, so just make it a little darker. And you can notice you can still see through. You can still see the lines underneath, so that's actually a very good thing that we have that option. Alright, so now let's go ahead and put in something a little bit darker around the back of the ear. Using the same brush, we're going to look for the areas. Basically, we're going to look for the planes of the hair and the facial hair. So this area here is going to be turning away from the light, so it's going to be getting a little bit darker. And I'm going to use the lighter brush, the light brush that we had for these shapes. I'm going to just lightly cover this. And then that's a single brush stroke. Put in a little glimpse there for the ear. And maybe something there for the tragus. So this is the, I think the antihelix there. And then the tragus of the ear over here. Don't really want to do much for that. But right around the side of the ear over here, it's going to get a little bit darker. And that's just because there's a shape of hair right around here that's overlapping the ear. I'm going to use the darker brush that we had with the face. Just put in a very definitive dark shape there. There we go. And might as well just look for the darkest accents now. So there's going to be a little dark accent there. And very simply, we're starting to get the effect of the form. So light shape over here. I'm thinking that I'm going to get something a little bit darker. So with the same brush, I don't really need to clean it because I still want some remnants of the titanium white in the brush. I actually can't speak today. I didn't have to clean any of these brushes just yet. So that's really there's really a lot of economy of time when it comes to the underpainting, especially in monochrome. We're economizing our time. And we're really trying to get the most information we possibly can using the simplest methods and therefore optimizing basically each stage of the painting. So I'm pushing that shape a little bit darker because it is turning away from the light. I'm kind of treating this like a little bit of a sphere turning right away from the light. And then we're going to put a little bit of a halftone, a darker halftone here. So it's going to be darker there. And remember the edge of the hairline. I usually mention that this edge, what do you think? Is this edge going to be soft? Is that edge going to be sharp? Well, you can already tell what I'm doing. I'm softening that edge. Very, very soft. It's almost like a whispered edge. Very, very soft. Now we're going to look for some darker shapes right around here. So let's suppose down there it's going to be a little darker. Sorry that the canvas keeps kind of bouncing around. Darker down there. Darker over here. Very simple. Alright, so we're going to be working a little bit alla prima-ish, meaning wet on wet. So with a different brush, clean brush, we're going to add some of these lighter shapes right on top of the darker shapes that we mixed up. It's a little bit of a painterly trick. Going to use the bristles of the brush to suggest the illusion of individual strands of hair. There we go. And right around here, we're going to do the same thing. See that? So each individual strand of hair is being painted in using the bristles of the brush. This is a size 6 flat, actually it's a size 4 flat bristle brush. See how we're getting the effect of the hair? Very, very simple. Definitely economizing our time. So the value of the hair is lighter. The local value, meaning kind of the average value for the hair, is darker. So is lighter. So we're going to paint that in lighter. Very carefully. I'm going to soften this edge. A little bit lighter over there. Now we're starting to get the illusion of the hair. Well, let's go ahead and try to put in a darker plane here. Notice how I didn't even have to mix any paint. Just taking the brush with the darker value and just throwing that in there. Lighter over here. Now I don't want to treat each area of the hair the same, so I'm emphasizing a little bit more structure for the hair right up here, and then as it tapers off down here, I'm going to emphasize it less. So let's go ahead and do that. So by emphasizing it less, doesn't mean that I'm going to pay less attention to it. It just means that I'm not going to put in as much information. So put in a single little brush mark there, or a single little shape there. I'm going to pull a little more light over here. We're using fewer brush strokes around here, letting the shape go all the way up here. I'm going to have some little strands of hair, but not that much. And I think that we need to put in another little accent where one form meets another form right here. So the form for the hair is going to meet right around here, the bottom of the ear. And let's go ahead and just put in this little darker shape for the ear. I don't want to do too much for the ear. I just want to have the shape of the ear, or at least not lose the shape of the ear that we already established. I think that's about all right. Now back to the lighter brush. So there's going to be a little shape for his mouth down here. I can still kind of see it, so I placed it in the initial drawing, and I went over it with the paint, but I can still see a little bit of paint showing underneath of that, so that's pretty neat. Darker right there. Don't need much for this. Tell you what, while we still have this brush, let's get a little bit of raw umber. A little more raw umber with the dark brush, and we're just going to put in a very dark shape here. Now remember, the beauty of raw umber is that you can paint as dark as you want, and it's still not going to be as dark as, say, burnt umber, and it's definitely not going to be as dark as ivory black. So it compresses the value range, which is what we want. And I don't want to do too much for the tobacco pipe. Just a simple little shape, and maybe that's enough for now. So we'll continue on with this little shape here. But what we do want for that little tobacco pipe is the edge. It's a very sharp edge. I'm just going to sharpen that edge a little bit. Very simple, and I think we'll throw in some highlights there. First, let's make sure to get this edge very sharp around here and then softer back here. And very quickly, we're going to establish the effect of form. Let's go ahead and throw in a little more light over here. Very simple. Keep in mind that the camera is at an angle, so again, just remember, camera's at an angle, just so I don't block the footage. In the future, I hope to be able to have a camera crew to help with the filming. But anyway, let's throw in a few more brush strokes there. Here and there and here. Just for fun. We're almost done. Almost done with the underpainting of the portrait. Then tomorrow we'll move on to the other stuff. A little more of a dark shape. There we go, right around there. Oh yeah, so the highlights for the tobacco pipe. So let's see, there's one right here. You know what, I can't keep my hands straight like that, and I don't feel like getting my maul stick, so I'm going to do this. I admit I did have some coffee this morning, so yeah, it's kind of hard to hold my hands straight. There we go, one light there, a little bit of a light right around here. So I guess the next thing for that little tobacco pipe would be switch to the halftone brush that we had before. Right there, a little bit of a light around the edge of that, and nothing more than that for now. Let's throw in a little more of a cast shadow just so this tobacco pipe looks like it is actually there, meaning without this cast shadow here, this wouldn't really look like it's in the same painting. Let's just try to cover up this line here. So I think that should be about good for today. So today we really did spend quite a bit of time just analyzing the forms on the face, just like we did in the portrait study. But then again, of course, we added the tobacco pipe and the angle. I think the angle is a little bit better. I think I like this angle a little more than the angle that I had for the portrait study. That being said, I really hope that today's video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and as always, I'm trying to bring the experience of being here, being in the studio, creating these paintings every single day. I really want to bring that to you every single day. That is my hope. That is my ambition. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll be back again tomorrow. And before I go, there's just one thing to address. Fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. What is that? So I forgot to cover this. This is a shadow, not his, not an extra finger. I mean, nothing wrong with extra fingers. It's just that Yeah, that's not supposed to be there. So remember, I changed the hands. I moved his pointer finger out towards there. I don't know. I may change it back to the way that the photo reference has, but yeah, I just wanted to address that. So pointer finger, the middle finger, the index finger, I guess that's called, the pinky finger, 1, 2, 3, 4, and his thumb is hidden behind the book. And yeah, anyway, just had to cover that because tomorrow we're going to be working on this. Yep, just wanted to make sure that that was covered. And just like yesterday and the day before, here is an image with the camera as close to front and center as I can possibly get it, just so you can see what the painting looks like without as much photographic distortion. And again, just like I mentioned before, the camera is distorting this side of the canvas quite a bit. But in any case, I hope that today's video helps you out, and I'll be back again tomorrow.